service, so you get another short sermon tonight. We're looking forward to being able to continue to encourage folks through the writing of cards, and we know what an impact it has already had on many. So we're thankful for that. This morning we're going back to the Old Testament. It's been a couple weeks since we've looked at an Old Testament story, and we can learn and glean much from the writings of the prophets, the wisdom that we read in the Psalms and Proverbs and the wisdom literature, and the accounts of what Israel went through. We can learn many things to do and many, many things not to do from their lives and the things that they did and didn't do. And so that's where we're going to be this morning. Turn with me over to 1 Samuel chapter 13. We're going to look at chapter 13 and 14. And I want to lead off with this question. Have you ever felt surrounded? Maybe a better question for that would be, have you ever felt overwhelmed? Circumstances of life overwhelm us. I felt it in my own life, times where it feels like you don't know what direction to turn. And I know that my experience in life doesn't hold a candle to many of the things that you have had to deal with in your life. There's been tragedies. There's been deaths. There's been problems. There's been financial issues. All of these different things in a body of believers of this size, difficulties, and it feels like sometimes in life the walls are closing in around us. And that's what Israel had to deal with many times. And in this case, it was a physical army. And while we may not have things like that causing us to deal with fear and doubt, we definitely have armies surrounding us in life. Maybe not a physical one, but in the spiritual realm, yes. And in difficulties of life, also, yes. And in 1 Samuel chapter 13, Saul is tasked with preparing those around him to follow God in faith. But there's only one problem. Saul lacks it. He has a problem with faith. And in fact, like many of us, Saul many times tries to put the cart before the horse. He's waiting in faith, and the next thing you know, things don't look so good. And so what does Saul do that we find ourselves doing a lot of times? He thinks we've got to take matters into our own hands. And that's what he does. And we're going to read about it here. And we're also going to look at this morning the relationship that faith has with fear. And also we're going to see somebody who is an unsung hero of the Old Testament. And we're going to look at that. And there's many people in the Scripture, some of which don't even have a name. They're unnamed in the Bible, but their great faith is something that reminds us. So let's look at this together this morning, and let's see the circumstance that was going on. First couple verses is noted that Saul was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned for 42 years over Israel. Now Saul chose for himself 3,000 men of Israel, of whom 2,000 were with Saul. And we go on down and we realize that there are some who are with Saul and some are with his son Jonathan. And we're going to get to that here in just a few minutes as well. But the question is, what are they up against? What are they up against? And so we know the problems that have been going on with the nation of Israel going up against the Philistines. Not just them, but many other nations and many other problems. But the Philistines were of the forefront of those groups because they were very gruesome. They were very numerous. They were very much a battle-tested people. And so there were many problems that came from them. Listen to what they were up against in this passage. Watch this. Down here in verse number 5. Now the Philistines assembled to fight with Israel 30,000 chariots and 6,000 horsemen, and people like the sand which is on the seashore in abundance. And when they came and camped at Mishmeth, east of Bethaven, when the men of Israel saw that they were in trouble, can't we relate to that? There's the situation. They look around them and they feel as if they are surrounded. They feel like there is no escape, and they're supposed to be looking to God, who was supposed to be their leader, but we know that they wanted a king. We want to be like everybody else. We want to have the same things that they have, and they have kings, and we want a king for ourselves. And so let's look to Saul and see what he is going to say and what he is going to, more importantly, do or not do in this circumstance. Well, we know that there would be a problem with that. When the men of Israel saw that they were in trouble, for the people were hard pressed, the people kept themselves hidden in caves and in cliffs, and in crypts, and in pits. And some of the Hebrews crossed the Jordan into the land of Gad and Gilead. But as for Saul, he was still in Gilgal, and the people followed him trembling. These people were completely in fear. They looked around them and they saw an army that is described as more numerous than the sands on the seashore. Can you imagine this? And we read at the beginning of this chapter, there's only a few thousand of those who were on God's side. Only a few thousand of them. And when they see this, what do they begin to do? Well, many of them run for the hills. Something that we might be tempted to do sometimes when we feel the hardships of life pressing in on us. They're running for the pits, the crypts. They're hiding in graves. That's how fearful they are of their circumstance. And Saul stayed still at Gilgal, and all the people followed him trembling. Now he waited for 7 days until the appointed time that Samuel had set. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattering from him. So Saul said, and here it is, "Bring me the burnt offering and the peace offerings." And he offered the burnt offering, but as soon as he had finished offering the burnt offerings, behold, Samuel came. And Saul went out to meet and greet him, and Samuel said to him, "What have you done?" And Saul said, "Since I saw that the people were scattering from me, and that you did not come at the appointed time, and that the Philistines were assembling at Mishmeth, I thought, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not asked the favor of the Lord. So I worked up the courage." Don't you just love his language here? I found it within myself. I worked up the courage and offered the burnt offering. And Samuel has to be just shaking his head right here. The Lord told you what to do, Saul. And when you saw that there was a test of your faith that is occurring, you decided, I'm not going to wait for the Lord. I'm not going to do it His way. I'm going to do it mine. And that's one of the most dangerous things that we can do as Christians today. If I don't knock off this sound equipment. That's one of the most dangerous things that we can do as Christians today is try to take matters into our own hands when God has told us what to do. And there's several lessons we can learn in here about what Saul did and did not do. And that is that sometimes people have the right attitude and the right mindset behind something, but that's not going to save them. Because God has instructed us to do things His way. Not Spencer's way, not the elders at Ocoee Street's way. God has instructed us to do things His way. And even if we do things that we think are righteous, but we do them outside of God's plan for us, we're no closer to the truth than the people who don't do it in the first place. That's where Saul was. He says, I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And Samuel rebukes him. He tells him, this was something that you should not have done. But Samuel said to Saul in verse 13, you have acted foolishly. You have not kept the commandment of the Lord your God, which He commanded you. For the Lord would now establish your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not endure. The Lord has sought for Himself a man after His own heart. And the Lord has appointed him ruler over His people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you. Don't you think what we're reading about in 1 Samuel 13 and 14 was Saul's test? Saul, what are you going to do when the rubber meets the road? You look the part of a king. You're taller, you're handsome, you have everything, and I'm now going to test you to see what you're really made of. And Saul failed his test. Church, I would encourage you today, do not fail yours. Because we're all being tested. We've looked at that many times. Saul fails his test here, and it doesn't only cost him in this moment, it cost him his kingdom. What we do or don't do in our lives can cost us an opportunity to live with God forever in His kingdom. What is our resolve going to be? Let's continue. It only gets worse. Let's skip down to verse number 19. So we're thinking, all right, well, we know that the numbers aren't necessarily a sure thing when it comes to what God can do. God's delivered people many times who were of much less number than those that were attacking and defending. And so maybe that's going to be something that will happen. Well, look at verse number 19. Now no blacksmiths could be found in all of the land of Israel, because the Philistines said, otherwise the Hebrews will make swords and spears. So all of Israel went down to the Philistines, each to sharpen his plowshare, his mattocks, his axe, and his hoe. The charge was 2/3 of a shekel for the plowshares, the mattocks, the forks, the axes, and to fix the cattle goads. So it came about on the day of battle that neither sword nor spear was found in the hands of any of the people who were with Saul and Jonathan, but they were found with Saul and his son Jonathan. And the garrisons of the Philistines went out to the gourds of Mishma. These were people who were attacking with farming implements. Can you imagine going against an army with thousands of chariots, thousands of horsemen, with the greatest weapons technology that they had at the time, and you're standing there with a pitchfork? That ain't happening. Spencer's running for the hills at that point. I mean, they're using farming implements. The only people who had swords and spears amongst them was the king and his son. That's it. And so you can understand from this moment why the people had a lack of faith. For one, they weren't seeing it from their leaders. Saul wasn't exemplifying faith. He was sitting still. And we're going to look at that here in just a moment. He was sitting still when he should have been moving. Faith will make us move, folks. It's something we need to remember. And so we end chapter 13 with a situation that seems like it is too much to overcome. It seems like there's no shot that they have. And I'll say this, when it comes to human on human, they had no shot. Their only shot was the Lord. And we're going to see what happens with that as we get down to chapter 14. We're going to notice something here. Now the day came that Jonathan, the son of Saul, said to the young man who was carrying his armor. This man that we meet here in verse number 1 is unnamed. He's the armor bearer of the son of the king. And he tells him something here. Listen to this. Come and let us cross over to the Philistines' garrison that is on the other side. But he did not tell his father. Saul was staying on the outskirts of Gilboa under the pomegranate tree in Migron, and the people who were with him numbered about 600 men. You notice something there? 600 men is a lot less than what we read back in chapter 13. This is evident that the scattering has continued to take place as they sit in the camp day after day, continuing not to act, continuing not to do something for the Lord, and they sit and they shake in fear. One by one, the people are leaving. The situation is going from bad to worse, and in this moment where it seems like it couldn't get any worse than it did, Jonathan decides, let's do something. Let's go on and cross, and let's go and see what we can do. And it's kind of funny, we see this picture of Saul here as he sits under this pomegranate tree. It's just kind of funny to me, and he sits under this tree with 600 men. But Jonathan refuses to sit still. The first point I want us to consider this morning is that faith moves when fear sits. Faith will move you when fear wants you to sit still. And acting in faith, let me clarify this, acting in faith is not a lack of fear. It doesn't mean that you have no fear, but true faith is acting regardless of what you feel inside. Because you know of who you serve, and you're sure of that when you're not sure of anything else. Notice this. The son of Ahitub, Ichabod's brother, the son of Phinehas, the son of Eli, the priest of the Lord at Shiloh, was wearing an ephod, and the people did not know that Jonathan had gone. And so he gets a bit lost in the crowd. They don't realize that he is gone because of the number of people that were there. Now, between the gorges which Jonathan sought to cross over to the Philistines' garrison, there was a rocky crag on the one side and a rocky crag on the other side. And the name of one was Bozez, and the other was Sina. And one crag rose on the north opposite Michmash. And so there's some, I wish I could have put it up on the PowerPoint this morning, but I wasn't sure yet about connecting the computer to it. But we know where this is. And there is some great pictures of this area, and it's a great valley in between these two mountains, and it's a very treacherous terrain. It would not be the kind of place that you would want to have to navigate, but here they are doing it in this passage. Then Jonathan said to the young man who was carrying his armor, Come, let us cross over the garrison of these uncircumcised men. There's the faith. These people aren't followers of God. These are uncircumcised. They aren't following the commandments of God. Perhaps the Lord will work for us, because the Lord is not limited to saving by many or by few. Church, Jonathan got it. When nobody else around him understood, when everybody else was acting in fear, when they were sitting in fear and not going the mile that the Lord wanted them to do, Jonathan understood that the Lord's victory wasn't contingent on the numbers. It was contingent on faith. And that's still true for us today. The Lord's victory isn't contingent on every circumstance of life going right for us. The Lord's already won. As Christians, we have already won. Followers of God have already won. And so Jonathan has a bold faith. I think it's interesting. Perhaps the Lord will act on our behalf. Nothing can hinder the Lord from saving, whether by many or by few. Jonathan doesn't have certainty here in this passage of himself. His certainty does not come from himself. It does not come from his abilities or the things that he can do for himself. His certainty is in the Lord. He has confidence in God's power. And we see the word perhaps here. And, when we look at the word perhaps, we kind of view that as, oh, well, maybe this will happen. We don't really know. I don't think that this is a lack of faith on his part here in this passage. When he says perhaps the Lord will do this, I just don't think that it's a lack of faith. It's a doubt of some way. I think this is showing a humble faith. Perhaps the Lord will do this on our account. And he knows that trusting God's ability whenever he submits to his will. And when he sees all of these people who fail to act, that's what he is wanting to do. And I think the most important part of this is something that we've already made mention of, is that Jonathan sees what everybody else misses. And that is that the victory is the Lord's if you trust in him, and that it's not contingent on the numbers. It's not contingent on how things look around us. Amen. We meet somebody else, though, don't we? We meet an armor bearer that is following him into this, very difficult situation where he's probably thinking to himself, I don't know if I'm going to come back. This is a suicide mission in some senses of the word. And so we're going to this place where the Philistines are that are numerous and to their encampment, and I don't think I'm going to return. That's probably what is going through the armor bearer's head. Church, we don't even know his name, but we know of his faith. There's many people in the Scripture that we don't know of their name, but we can see their faith. We can see that they acted in accordance to the will of God. Several things we can learn from this armor bearer. And let's look here. When Jonathan tells him that in verse number 6, come, let us cross over. Look at what he says to him. Verse number 7, his armor bearer said to him, do everything that is in your heart. Turn yourself to it, and here I am with you, as your heart desires. Can't we learn something from that? What an act of faith. I don't know what's going to happen, but I trust you. And this can teach us great lessons about biblical companionship. And we see this from the armor bearer here, his loyalty to Jonathan. And I think that we need to realize that faith thrives in fellowship. Remember that. Faith thrives in fellowship. A lot of times, our faithfulness to God, it's a lot easier to be faithful to God when there's people that are walking alongside us. Isn't that something that we're blessed with in the church? Whenever I'm having a bad day, whenever there's something that is bad that has happened into my life, I can go call into my brothers and sisters and say, I need encouragement. I just need help to get through today. And some of us are in a place of life like that right now, where it's just a struggle to make it to the end of the day. And we need each other to do that and to accomplish that. Well, we see that modeled right here. I don't know what you're going through, but I'm with you. And I'll continue to stand with you. And he doesn't do something that I would be tempted to do. When we're reading the Bible and we're reading through all of these accounts, it's easy to lose scope of the magnitude of this situation, right? We look back. They're up against an army more numerous than the sands of the sea. Thousands of chariots, thousands of horsemen, all of these people that were against them, and there's just a few hundred of them left at this time. And so we see the magnitude of what is going. If we were the armor bearer, my question for us today is, and a test of what we are thinking and where we are in our faith is, what would our response be to what Jonathan had said here in this passage? I tell you what Spencer'd say, you're crazy, man. You're going to get us killed. You're telling me we're going to climb up these rocks and we can't even see over the top of the hill, and we're going to get up there and somehow the Lord's going to give us a victory? You have got to be kidding me. I mean, isn't that what the human side of us would want to say? We've got no hope. We've got no shot. But that's not what he does here. He says, I'm with you. Every Jonathan needs an armor bearer. Every single one of us needs somebody like this man that's mentioned in the scripture right here, and yet we don't even know his name. And we need to be that for somebody else as well. Every Jonathan needs an armor bearer, someone who believes not in the power of the individual, but in God's power working through us. Because He can work through every single one of us. And so here's a question for you today as well. Who has been your armor bearer, and who have you been armor bearer to? Who are you pouring into? Who are you helping go the last mile of the way when it might be difficult? And who has done that for you? Because we need that for one another. Well, we're going to see what happens when we take a risk or a leap of faith for God. Let's see what happens in this passage. They cross over, and there in verse number 9, if they say to us, wait until we come to you, then we will stand in our place and not go up to them. But if they say, come up to us, then we will go up, for the Lord has handed them over to us. I love the assuredness he talks about that there. And this shall be the sign to us, when the two of them revealed themselves to the garrison of the Philistines said, behold, Hebrews are coming out of the holes where they have kept themselves hidden. Don't you hear the arrogance in this? These people are acting in fear. They don't have God. They have nothing. They're hiding in holes. And here they come up to us. That's the attitude of the Philistine here. So the men of the garrison responded to Jonathan and his armor bearer and said, come up to us and we will inform you of something. Well, did they have something coming? We're going to inform you of something here in this. And Jonathan said to his armor bearer, come up after me. The Lord has handed them over to Israel. Then Jonathan climbed up with his hands and feet and his armor bearer behind him. And the men fell before Jonathan, and his armor bearer put some to death after him. Now the first slaughter which Jonathan and his armor bearer inflicted was about 20 men within half a furlong in an acre of land. And there was trembling in the camp, in the field, and among all the people, even the garrison, and the raiders trembled, and the earth quaked, and it became a great trembling. Now Saul's watchmen and Gibeah of Benjamin looked, and behold, the multitude dissolved, and went here and there. So Saul said to the people who were with him, look carefully now, and see who has left us. And when they looked, behold, Jonathan and his armor bearer were not there. And so Saul's folks are still sitting in the camp at this point. They haven't moved, they haven't acted in faith, and they see the result of this. And we read on down through this passage, verse 20, then Saul and all the people who were with him rallied and came to the battle, and behold, every man's sword was against his fellow Philistine, and there were great confusion. Now the Hebrews were with the Philistines previously, who went up with them around the camp. Even they also returned to be with the Israelites. So were with Saul and Jonathan, with all the men of Israel who had kept themselves hidden from the country of Ephraim, heard that the Philistines had fled, they also closely pursued them in the battle. So the Lord saved Israel that day, and the battle spread beyond Beth-aven. One simple act of faith. We had a lesson several months ago about what we call the ripple effect. How one act of faith, one stepping out and making a decision for the Lord, just one act of faith can affect so many things. One person that you talk to about the gospel could change the eternity for many people. Because imagine the people that they could go and reach. One conversation could change somebody's life. One act of faith in this passage turn the tide. And so the question is, are we going to do those things in faith? Are we going to be an armor bearer to somebody who needs one? And are we going to follow God even when it looks difficult? God honors bold, humble initiative. Are we going to act in faith? Or are we going to act in fear? The devil wants us to sit still. He doesn't mind people sitting in the pews of the church. There's people that sit in church pews every week that are just as lost as people who don't know the Lord at all. And that's a scary thought. He doesn't mind if we're sitting in pews, if that's all that we do. He doesn't want us acting in faith. He doesn't want us sharing the gospel. He does not want us taking a leap of faith when it might be difficult. Faith acts even when odds don't favor it. In our lives, we're up against many times, and as we began this morning thinking about this relationship that we have between faith and fear, we realize that sometimes it looks like there's very difficult odds. Maybe for you it is a diagnosis. Maybe it is a financial crisis. Maybe you're just trying your best just to keep the lights turned on. Maybe it's a family struggle. We have those, don't we? We have those problems in our families. Maybe it is a problem in our family that is keeping us from fully committing to serving God. Whatever it is, and I would stress that, whatever it is, you can know this morning that God is bigger than that. And that if you act in faith, He will bless you. Doesn't mean that things are always going to be easy, but He will bless you. And we can have assurance of that. A small act of faith in 1 Samuel 14. You know what God did with that? He multiplied it. He magnified it. 20 men perishing from the sword here in this passage meant that chaos would ensue in the whole other nation. Don't you think God was just waiting for that one moment of faith where somebody would step up to the plate and say, God, I trust you more than what my eyes tell me? He was just waiting for that. And He is waiting for that from you and from me. He's waiting for us to take a step of faith. Will you take that step this morning? Will we take that step of faith? This morning, if you've not yet become a Christian, why not take that step of faith? The devil doesn't mind that you sit in the pews. He doesn't want you coming forward. He doesn't want you asking for the prayers of the church. He wants you to stay content, sitting still where you are. That's what He wants. Are we going to give it to Him? Think about these things as together we stand.